if you look at the markets today, you could totally be forgiven for thinking we are living in a completely split reality.
Oh, yeah. It's entirely schizophrenic out there right now.
Right. Like, on one hand, you have these technology companies that are just minting trillion-dollar valuations seemingly out of thin air. They're scaling infinitely.
Literally trillions.
Exactly. And then literally on the exact same day, you step outside and the physical world, the one that actually makes your morning coffee and your grocery run possible, that world is becoming painfully, almost comically expensive.
Yeah, it really is a tale of two absolute extremes.
It is. So welcome to today's exploration of the source material. We've got a massive stack of documents in front of us today. We're looking at tech earnings reports, agricultural commodity charts, and some pretty intense geopolitical intelligence briefings.
Lots of ground to cover.
Right. And our mission today is really to just figure out why the digital world is printing trillions while, the physical world is struggling to just put juice on your breakfast table.
Yeah, that's the real question.
And we are thrilled you're joining us for this polished economic storytelling experience. This is brought to you by clearandaratio.com, which is, of course, your home for financial candy, free-thinking daily world briefs, brain candy rabbit holes, and classic audiobooks.
Best place on the internet.
Absolutely. Now, just to set some ground rules right up front before we start tearing these sources apart, what we're doing today is it's providing economic context.
Right context, not advice.
Exactly. We're looking at the mechanics of the market.
Yeah.
This is absolutely not investment advice. We're not here to tell you to buy or sell or hold or, try to time the market. We're just here to understand the why behind all these headlines.
Yeah, because understanding that broader context is really the only way to navigate through all the daily noise. And I gotta say, today, the noise coming from the technology sector is it's deafening.
It really is.
We're seeing this fundamental shift in how the market actually values artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Because, for the last 2 years, the story was all about future promise, right?
Right. It was all hype and pilot.
Exactly. Pilots, experimentation, what are these giant language models going to do 5 years down the line? But reading through the latest earnings reports, that narrative has shifted abruptly. It went from future promise straight to current revenue.
Show me the money.
Yeah. Companies are no longer just selling a vision. They're actually showing the receipts.
Well, and I've got the Snowflake earnings report right here. And, nothing screams showing the receipts quite like their massive 35% pre-market surge following this release.
That is a staggering jump.
Right. For a data storage company of that size, it's huge. And their management explicitly stated that AI is no longer just a tailwind for them. It is actively driving their business right now.
Yeah, and the specific catalyst they pointed to in that report, it's their new AI-powered coding and workflow platform.
Well, the Cortex Code thing.
Right, Cortex Code, or COCO, as they call it internally.
COCO, got it.
Yeah, their chief financial officer actually cited COCO as the single largest driver of their increased forecast. What they're doing is they're positioning Snowflake as what they call the agent control plane.
Okay, wait, let's unpack that for a second, because agent control plane sounds like, I don't know, a piece of hardware from a sci-fi movie or something.
It does sound super futuristic.
Yeah, so are we just talking about a fancy database where a chatbot lives? Like, what does that actually mean for the everyday enterprise user?
So think of it as a secure, enclosed arena for a company's artificial intelligence. Because as enterprises move beyond just, using AI chatbots to answer simple text questions, they're deploying these AI agents.
Okay.
And these agents are programs that can autonomously take actions. They're like reordering inventory when stocks are low, or routing customer complaints to the right department, or even, rewriting internal software code.
Wow, on their own.
Entirely on their own. And Snowflake wants to be the secure hub where all those different AI agents interact with the company's highly sensitive proprietary data.
Right, so they don't want that stuff out in the wild.
Exactly. They are providing this walled garden where the AI actually executes the work without leaking company secrets to the public internet.
Okay, but Snowflake's vision of, millions of AI agents talking to each other constantly, that creates a massive physical problem, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because where does all that conversation actually happen? It jams up the servers, and, that bottleneck actually brings us directly to Marvell technology. And I have to admit, I was kind of confused looking at Marvell's surge in our notes today.
Why is that?
Well, Wall Street has been completely obsessed with GPUs, right? The actual compute chips made by companies like NVIDIA. They've been obsessed for well over a year.
Right. Everyone knows the NVIDIA story.
Everyone knows it. So why is Marvell, which is fundamentally a networking company, suddenly the center of attention? Like, to me, it's like everyone went out and bought these massive high-performance sports car engines, the GPUs, but completely forgot that they needed to build, wider highways to actually drive them on.
That highway analogy actually hits the nail right on the head. Because up until now, investors have only been looking at the engines, and Marvell's earnings call perfectly illustrates this shift in the whole infrastructure cycle.
How so?
Well, their CEO talked extensively about this concept of agentic AI. We are moving past the phase of building single-shot reasoning models, which is just, you asking a prompt and the AI giving you one answer.
Like standard ChatGPT.
Right. The next phase is autonomous AI systems constantly communicating with other AI systems.
Wait, so like an AI agent in the supply chain department is rapidly firing data back and forth with an AI agent in the accounting department?
Yes, millions of times a second.
Good grief.
And they're communicating across these sprawling server clusters that cover the footprint of several football fields.
Right.
So that creates an unprecedented data traffic jam. The compute power, your sports car engine, is basically useless if the data cannot physically move fast enough between the servers to actually be processed.
So the bottleneck moves.
Exactly. It shifts the bottleneck, and therefore the infrastructure boom, squarely toward networking. When our sources mention optical interconnects, they aren't talking about standard copper wires anymore.
Because copper is too slow.
Too slow, and it generates way too much heat for this volume of data. They are talking about literally using lasers to fire data across fiber optic cables between the chips.
The lasers, okay.
Yeah, and it requires custom silicon just to manage that traffic. So Marvell is basically arguing that this underlying plumbing complexity is going to drive a massive long-term opportunity that goes way beyond just buying more GPUs.
Okay, that makes total sense. And it really explains why this infrastructure build-out is creating like a whole new class of corporate royalty. Because looking at the market caps in our sources, memory chip makers like South Korea's SK Hynix and the US-based Micron, they have officially crossed the $1 trillion valuation mark.
It's incredible.
They're joining the $1 trillion club simply because the demand for advanced memory to support these AI data centers is just insatiable right now.
It really is.
But, here's the critical secondary effect that I just keep getting stuck on. Someone has to pay for all this physical infrastructure. These optical interconnects and massive server farms cost tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah, the bill is definitely coming due. Which actually brings us to Meta's strategy in our briefing stack.
Oh, right, the subscription thing.
Exactly. Meta is currently rolling out a $3 to $4 monthly subscription tier across Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp.
Okay.
They're targeting power users, creators, and businesses with these premium AI features.
Mm-hmm.
And analysts at BNP Paribas estimate this could add roughly $13.5 billion in incremental revenue by 2028.
Okay, I have to push back on that projection a little bit.
Sure.
Is anyone actually going to pay a monthly subscription for WhatsApp just for AI features?
Well,
I mean, users have been trained for a decade and a half that Meta products are inherently free. Isn't that an incredible risk to their user base?
it is a risk, for sure, but it's a calculated necessity at this point. Meta is taking this massive capital expenditure for AI and finding a way to directly monetize just a fraction of their billions of users to offset those costs.
So they don't need everybody.
Right? They don't need everyone to pay. They just need the businesses and the creators who rely on their platforms for income to pay for these efficiency tools. So, the digital economy is finding ways to monetize their massive user bases to actually finance these rising capital expenditures.
Got it. So the digital world is finding new revenue streams, they're scaling effortlessly, and they're printing trillion-dollar market caps.
Yeah.
But, while the digital world scales infinitely, the physical world that's required to support us is hitting an absolute brick wall.
It really is.
And you, listening to this, you are feeling that impact the moment you sit down at the breakfast table.
Oh, the contrast laid out in these commodity charts couldn't be sharper.
No, it's wild. Let's talk about the 5-pound coffee in the UK or, the $9 Starbucks experience over in the US.
Yeah, it's getting painful.
It is. When I see prices this high, my immediate reaction is, frankly, skepticism. Like, are cafes just price gouging us? Is this just a case of premiumizing drinks, throwing in some matcha, hiring brand ambassadors, and just overcharging you? Or is there a genuine mechanical economic crisis happening in the supply chain?
Well, while there is certainly an element of corporate premiumization in modern cafe culture, the underlying data points to a cascading series of actual physical failures hitting the global coffee supply chain.
Okay.
And it's affecting both the higher-end Arabica beans and the cheaper Robusta beans.
Right.
So let's look at the physical constraints on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Over in Vietnam, which is the absolute powerhouse for Robusta beans,
Right.
they suffered a 30% drop in rainfall, which caused a severe drought. And that was followed by a massive typhoon right around harvest time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and a typhoon doesn't just delay a harvest. The severe winds literally physically uproot the trees, and they strip the coffee cherries right off the branches before they can even ripen. It basically destroys the crop entirely.
Man. And what about Arabica? Because I see Brazil mentioned a lot in the agricultural reports.
Right, so over in Brazil, which is the world's largest supplier of Arabica beans,
Hmm?
farmers are actually still trying to recover from severe frosts that hit back in 2021.
2021, that was years ago.
Yeah, but coffee trees are incredibly delicate. So when a severe frost hits, the water inside the plant cells freezes and expands, and it basically bursts the cell walls.
Oh, brutal.
It is. Farmers often have to prune the trees all the way down to the stump, and then it takes 3 to 5 years for that tree to grow back and bear fruit again.
Okay, so you have extreme weather physically knocking out supply for years at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you layer on human friction.
Right. And looking strictly at the trade data and our sources, we see the impact of tariffs that were implemented during the previous Trump administration.
Yeah.
Specifically, there was a 46% levy on Vietnam and a 50% tariff on Brazil. And, setting aside the political strategy behind them entirely, our sources show the mechanical result was just total chaos in the U.S. import market.
Oh, complete chaos.
The price of roasted coffee in the U.S. surged faster than the price of gasoline, as importers were just scrambling to secure beans.
Yeah, tariffs add immediate cost, but new regulatory friction is adding severe logistical complexity too. The EU is rolling out these really strict anti-deforestation rules.
Oh, I read about this.
Yeah, these regulations literally require farmers in Vietnam and Brazil to provide exact GPS coordinates for the perimeters of their plantations.
That's insane.
Right, so European satellites can verify they aren't cutting down protected forests to grow coffee.
But how does a smallholder farmer in rural Vietnam even do that? Do they all have the smartphones and, the technical literacy required to map a polygon of their land and upload it to a European database?
Honestly, for many, it's nearly impossible without hiring middlemen.
Right, which costs money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have to hire agricultural cooperatives to handle the tech, and that eats directly into their razor-thin margins. And finally, you have the physical shipping crisis. Because to avoid the Houthi militant threats in the Red Sea, ships carrying those Vietnamese beans to Europe are taken the long way around the southern tip of Africa.
Adding what, a few hundred miles?
Try 4,000 miles to the journey.
4,000 miles.
Yeah, and that means more fuel burned, higher insurance premiums, and much longer transit times. So every single one of these factors, the frost, typhoons, tariffs, satellite regulations, and geopolitical conflict, it all adds a physical layer of cost to your morning cup of coffee.
Unbelievable. And it isn't just the coffee. Look at this data on the other breakfast staple, orange juice.
Oh, the orange juice data is wild.
A colleague of ours recently paid £5.30 just for the orange juice portion of a mixed drink at a restaurant in Kent.
Ouch.
Right. That sounds insane until you actually look at the commodity markets. The price of frozen orange juice concentrate has spiked from $2 a kilo to a completely unprecedented $7 a kilo.
Yeah, it's an incredible spike. And again, it is driven by physical, biological constraints that we just cannot easily control or, write code to fix.
Right.
In Florida, which historically drove the U.S. market, orange output is at its lowest level since the Great Depression.
Since the Great Depression.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is due to a combination of brutal hurricanes uprooting groves and a devastating bacterial disease called citrus greening.
I've actually seen pictures of this in the agricultural briefs. The fruit looks small, misshapen, and it just stays green. How does this bacteria actually destroy the crop?
It's incredibly insidious. So the bacteria is spread by this tiny insect called the Asian citrus psyllid.
Okay.
When the insect feeds on the tree's leaves, it injects the bacteria. The bacteria then multiplies inside the tree's phloem, which is essentially the vascular system that transports nutrients from the leaves down to the roots.
Right, so it blocks the plumbing.
Exactly. The bacteria clogs those nutrient pathways, literally starving the tree. The fruit it produces is bitter, totally unusable for juice, and eventually the entire tree just dies. And there is currently no cure.
So Florida's citrus industry is essentially choking to death on a biological level.
Pretty much.
And what about Brazil? I thought they were the backup plan for global juice.
Brazil usually dominates the global orange juice market, but they just recorded their worst crop since 1988.
You're kidding.
No. And again, it's due to extreme drought and their own outbreaks of citrus greening.
So how are the juice companies reacting? Because people still expect to buy juice at the grocery store.
Well, they're adapting to survive by literally altering the physical recipe.
Yeah.
You are starting to see manufacturers quietly blend orange juice with cheaper alternatives.
Like what?
They're using mandarin concentrate, which currently has less demand, or even mango puree.
Mango puree in orange juice.
Yeah, because mango is cheap right now. India had a fantastic harvest season. So blending these allows companies to maintain a sweet flavor profile while radically cutting their exposure to the soaring raw material costs of actual oranges.
Wow. The contrast is just jarring. I mean, you can deploy 1,000 AI agents to optimize your accounting software, but you cannot write a line of code to cure citrus greening or reverse a drought in Vietnam.
You really can't.
Which brings us to the ultimate physical constraint. Moving all these physical goods, whether it's coffee beans, mangoes, or, the fiber optic cables from our Marvell servers, it all requires transport, and transport requires energy.
Yeah.
And right now, according to our geopolitical briefs, energy is deeply entangled in conflict.
It is the unavoidable bottleneck of the physical economy.
Right. Let's look at the oil markets today. We saw Brent crude drop sharply from $98 down to $94 a barrel. Why? Well, because of Axios reports suggesting a potential breakthrough in U.S.-Iran ceasefire talks.
Right, some optimism.
Exactly. But then, almost immediately, prices rebounded as regional strikes continued. The market is just incredibly highly strung right now, reacting violently to single headlines.
And the market is so sensitive because of the geography of the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly a fifth of the world's total oil and liquefied natural gas passes through that single narrow waterway.
A fifth? Wow.
Yeah, so when regional conflict threatens to close it or even just disrupt it slightly, the ripple effects are immediate and severe, particularly for the aviation sector.
I was reading the International Energy Agency report on the jet fuel shortage. The numbers there are staggering.
They are. Jet fuel prices spiked by over 120%, jumping from roughly $831 to $1,838 per ton.
That's more than double.
Yeah. And Europe is highly vulnerable here. They lack the domestic refining capacity to produce enough jet fuel locally, which makes them heavily dependent on imports coming directly from the Gulf.
Right.
The IEA actually issued a warning that Europe might only have 6 weeks of jet fuel reserves left if those supply lines are severed.
6 weeks. That threatens to ground the entire aviation network.
And you are already seeing the real-world operational impact. Airlines like Lufthansa have announced they're cutting 20,000 flights.
Good Lord.
In the U.S., airline executives have been brutally honest with their investors, stating they have basically no choice but to pass 100% of these increased fuel costs directly onto the consumer.
Of course.
Furthermore, this conflict poses an existential threat to the Gulf model of aviation.
Oh, you mean the massive hub airports in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha?
Yeah.
I've flown through there. It's an incredibly efficient system. Why is it so threatened right now?
Because that entire business model relies on geography. It functions by moving millions of passengers from west to east, using the Gulf as a perfectly positioned geographic connecting point.
Right, it's right in the middle.
But that efficiency only exists if you can fly directly over that airspace in a straight line. If the airspace is closed due to the threat of drones and missiles, and the local refineries cannot safely ship jet fuel, that highly efficient model breaks down entirely.
It falls apart.
Right. We are already seeing massive cancellations. Airlines are being forced to find incredibly expensive, longer alternative routes around the conflict zones, and they're burning drastically more fuel in the process.
And this doesn't just affect tourists trying to get to a holiday in Bali, The geopolitical briefs connect this right back to the listener's wallet at home. The conflict involving Iran and the resulting energy crunch is directly causing a 13% spike in household energy price caps here.
Yeah, that's the real pain point.
We are looking at an average annual rise of 221 won, bringing the typical household bill up to 1,862. And this isn't just a matter of putting on a sweater and turning the thermostat down.
No, it's much more serious.
Our sources detail reports of citizens literally skipping meals just to ensure they can afford the electricity to keep essential medical equipment like ventilators running for their children.
It's awful.
That is a stark, devastating reality of how macroeconomics hits the kitchen table.
It really highlights the ultimate vulnerability of relying on a highly complex, geographically concentrated physical energy market. When the logistics break down, the human cost is just immediate and profound.
Okay, I want to ask you to pull the lens back for us as we bring this all together, because we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
We have.
When you look at these two realities side by side, companies generating billions in new revenue from AI subscriptions and memory chips, alongside consumers paying $9 for a cup of coffee and skipping meals to afford electricity, what is the core economic pattern here? Like, how do we connect these dots?
The broader pattern emerging from all these sources is a massive divergence in the global economy, driven entirely by the concept of friction.
Friction.
Yes, we are witnessing a stark divide between frictionless capital and friction-heavy capital.
Break that down for me. What do you mean by friction in this context?
Well, consider the physical reality we just discussed. It is heavily constrained by things that human beings cannot easily control or predict. We cannot control the weather causing droughts in Vietnam.
Right.
We cannot negotiate with the psyllid insects causing citrus greening in Florida. We struggle to resolve geopolitical wars closing the Strait of Hormuz, and we are constantly battling labor shortages, shifting shipping lanes, and complex satellite regulations.
It's all friction.
Exactly. The physical world is incredibly risky, volatile, and expensive to operate in right now. Every single step of the supply chain introduces a new potential point of failure. It is full of friction.
Right. If you were trying to move a physical good from point A to point B, a dozen different things can destroy your profit margin along the way.
Exactly. So what does smart money do in that environment?
It runs.
Capital takes flight. It seeks the path of least resistance. Investors in massive corporations are pouring trillions of dollars into the frictionless digital world. They prefer to fund software, AI infrastructure, and digital subscriptions.
Because it's safer.
Right. Because a line of code doesn't get stuck on a cargo ship in the Red Sea. An AI software agent doesn't require a 50% tariff to cross a border, and it doesn't die in a frost. The digital world offers infinite scalability without all the messy, unpredictable bottlenecks of the physical world.
That makes total sense. It totally explains why a company making software tools for AI can surge 35% in a single day, while a company trying to sell a physical product is fighting tooth and nail just to maintain their profit margins against rising fuel and raw material costs.
And this friction raises a critical question about how investors protect their wealth in this environment. It's why we are seeing figures like Anthony Pompliano making headlines in our financial sources with predictions of a $1 million Bitcoin.
Right. He was arguing that Bitcoin and AI stocks are essentially serving the identical purpose for investors right now.
Yes. And, whether you agree with his specific price target or not, his underlying thesis points directly to this exact friction. Investors look at the physical world and see embedded inflation prices permanently going up because of physical supply chain breakdowns and governments printing money to patch over the crises.
Right. So they look for an exit.
Exactly. They flee to hard digital assets like Bitcoin or highly scalable AI stocks, basically as an escape hatch. They are actively trying to exit the friction-heavy physical economy and park their wealth in the frictionless digital economy.
It is a profound shift in how capital moves, but it leaves me with a thought that is, frankly, a little unsettling.
What's that?
Well, if the smartest money in the world continues to retreat from the physical economy because it is just too volatile, too risky, and too friction-heavy, who is going to finance the unglamorous, tangible infrastructure required to actually keep our lights on, our planes flying, and our breakfast tables full? That is a terrifying thought to sit with. Because at the end of the day, you cannot eat code.
You really can't. Something to seriously chew on as you pay for your next cup of coffee. Thank you so much for joining us for today's analysis. We love unpacking these complex stories with you. Remember, you can find more of this polished economic storytelling at claraneratio.com, which is your home for financial candy, daily world briefs, and so much more. Until next time, keep questioning the narrative.